really nice to meet everyone, and thank you so much for carving a little bit out of your day to come and see how TRAILD works with SYSPRO and how we can, try and help you streamline, automate, and protect your accounts payable process. So, my name is Adam Lesky. I'm the VP of Growth here, and I'm going to take you through a deep dive on the TRAILD product, exactly how it works with SYSPRO, and its capability in terms of trying to make your process just that little bit more efficient and also more secure. So I'll hand over to you, Trace, for introductions to yourself and to Daniel, and we'll take it from there.
Hi all, thanks for joining today. My name is Tracy. I'm the General Manager of Solution Engineering. I've been working with SYSPRO customers globally for the last sort of 15, 20 years. So I have lots of experience in SYSPRO, working now with TRAILD and ensuring that our SYSPRO customers are getting the most out of TRAILD and their SYSPRO system to help them streamline their automations.
Hi everyone, I'm Daniel. I'm the GM for TRAILD Business in EMEA. I'll keep it brief and leave it there. I'm based in London. We'll hand back to Adam and we'll get cracking.
Excellent. Thanks, Tracy and Daniel. So, guys, what I wanted to do is start with a bit of a story. So, a little bit of background as to where TRAILD came from. So, I understand that the product is very much driven around AP efficiency and financial control and risk management. But where the company was established in 2018 was my co-founder had this flash of insight in his family business. They were running, it came very much out of industry, and he was running a large pork and chicken distribution business. And unfortunately, in that business, they dealt with $3 to $4 million worth of AP payments a week. So it was material. It's an agriculture company, so they're dealing with high throughput and low margins. And they had a couple of AP staff that were responsible for entering the AP documents, reviewing them, checking them, making sure they were right, matched to a purchase order or a GRN. They were doing their normal daily process. And one of their supplier invoices along the way had been compromised. A supplier they'd dealt with for many years, purchasing wood chips on a farm, and they had 25 different farms. And this supplier was a known supplier that they'd worked with regularly over the years. And unfortunately, their invoice had been compromised on its way into the business. And the AP clerk, luckily enough, identified that the payment details had changed. So they did what any logical person would do. They called the supplier. They tried to verify and validate the payment details. The supplier said, yes, correct. It's our Melbourne office, not our Western Australian office. Please update the payment details below. And so they went into their ERP settings. They updated the payment details, and they had payment made throughout the payment run. A couple of days later, they received another supplier invoice. It was not irregular, given they purchased wood chips on the farm for all 25 different farms quite regularly. And they received another supplier invoice, of which they paid that as well. And then a couple of days after that, the supplier called the business and said, I haven't been paid. Where's our money? And at that point, they were like, what do you mean? Where's the money? Like, we've paid you. And it turns out that the scheme, the business email compromise of the supplier invoice on the way into the business, it turns out that the payment details had not only been adjusted, but so was the phone number. And the AP clerk had actually called the number on the invoice and spoken to the fraudster, who said, yes, this is the correct payment details. It's our different office, and made those changes. Once those changes were made in the ERP, the payments were able to be processed and made through. And so at that point, there was sort of that flash of insight, because he'd recently gone to the gas station or petrol station to fill up his car, and his card had been skimmed, and he'd got an unusual transaction processed in Vancouver overnight, and he got an instant text notification from the bank to say, this looks suspicious. Was this you? Do you want to approve the transaction or suspend the card? And he's thinking to himself, why have we got all this security and all this protection on a $10 transaction, but when it comes to my $3 to $4 million of AP payments, a week running through my business, I'm relying on manual review to check everything and make sure everything's correct. So at that point, he went out and he was a standard ERP system user, and he was looking for a solution to manage the risk side of the unfortunate events that had in terms of the business email compromise, but also to make that process really efficient. So as much as to speed it up, he wanted that visibility and control throughout what was going on in the organization. And unfortunately, for years of searching, there was no solution that sort of tackled both of those problems. which led him to building TRAILD. So that's the story of the company. Is it's very much driven out of industry. It's come out of the true manufacturing space and in agriculture industry, where businesses do deal with different sorts of volume of AP documents. They've got a lot of manual process, and obviously the businesses to some extent don't have that level of security and protection like they do on their credit cards today. And so that's where TRAILD was born. In saying that, I want to talk a little bit about what TRAILD does with SYSPRO. So we are, as I mentioned, focused on two key areas. We're focused on AP efficiency and risk management. How do we make sure what's going through is correct, and also that we're doing it as fast as possible? And then why TRAILD? So specifically, TRAILD is a native SYSPRO-integrated solution. So it's built for SYSPRO. It's got real-time integrations through the E.NET Systems Manager and business objects. Obviously, it's a simple implementation, and I know that sounds a bit crazy for some of you that have been around SYSPRO a long time, but one of the biggest pieces of feedback that we've had over the 200 SYSPRO customers that use the platform is that it's been so simple to get up and running. So it can be implemented in days, not months, not years. In terms of the licensing, it is all wrapped into the price of the product, given that we are a global ISV with SYSPRO. And obviously, we've been working with the team at Nexus in terms of the UK and European region. So, great partner of ours there. So what I want to do is I just want to run through a quick video to give you a highlight and a taste of what the product does, and then we'll get into the actual thick and in the insights of the actual product itself. So I'm just going to play this quick 60-second video for you.
Ever feel like your finance team is trekking through a dense forest of paperwork, stumbling over invoices and getting tangled in approval processes? Accounts payable automation exists, but worry it will accelerate risks of errors and invoice fraud, and that you'll lose control. Meet TRAILD, the secure path to streamlined accounts payable. TRAILD's AI, like a seasoned navigator, expertly extracts invoice data from even the trickiest invoices, allocates coding, and matches line items to purchase orders and receipts. Unlike traditional OCR that keeps stumbling over the same mistakes, TRAILD learns how you deal with your suppliers, adapting itself to the nuances of your AP landscape for unparalleled accuracy. And just like you have, watching over your personal payments, with TRAILD you have a 24/7 lookout patrolling your business invoices and payments, scanning for anomalies and errors, and flagging risks of potential fraud. With all your invoices clearly mapped, tracked, and in the one place, you control the pace. Set up workflows in seconds to automatically approve and fast-track the majority of low-risk or PO-matched invoices, while directing higher-risk invoices that require more attention through digital approval paths. It's easy for approvers to review on the go. Approved invoices are seamlessly synced in real time into your accounting system for batching and processing. You'll gain a bird's-eye view of your supplier payments and any associated risks, like changed bank details or improper approvals. Plus, suppliers are verified across the network and government databases, offering executives high-level oversight over potential pitfalls before releasing payment. Elevating your finance team with TRAILD isn't a complex project to take on. As a seamless extension of your existing system, you'll be up and running in hours, not months. So, if you're ready to automate your AP while staying in control, then it's time for TRAILD.
Perfect. So hopefully you got a bit of a view as to the overall product there and what the sort of problems that we solve are around efficiency and control. But what I really want to go into is a little bit more around the complexity of what you have as SYSPRO customers around your AP process. So as I mentioned, we've got hundreds of customers using the platform, and we've seen all different use cases and business process around AP, and things from printing and filing AP documents, sitting in filing cabinets, manually entering AP documents directly into SYSPRO, having difficulty of what do you do when the GRN hasn't been processed yet? Where do you save the draft invoice? The systematic matching to purchase orders and GRNs is a real challenge for a lot of customers. How do you make sure what's actually been receipted and what's been raised on the purchase order has been accounted for on the invoice? How do you manage those variances in terms of procurement? How do you route them to the right person for constant communication, tracking, auditability? How do you make sure things are available to you to make the right decisions at the right time as to whether you should be processing this invoice or not? We also deal with a lot of complexity around landed cost allocations, so things like drop shipments and apportionment costings. The ability to be able to find historical information. So when someone walks over to your desk or emails you and says, hey, what is our normal supplier payment history, and can you find invoice 673? You have the ability to do that at the tip of your fingers. And then we have the digital overview reconciliation process for supplier statement reconciliation and payment processing. So TRAILD really is designed to automate the process around AP, everything from invoice in all the way through to payment out. And I'm going to take you through that entire journey today. But as I said, these are the sort of complex challenges that our SYSPRO customers have pre-TRAILD, and these are the sort of ways that we're going to show you that we address them. So obviously, you're probably thinking to yourself, well, why TRAILD? Why is it so important? This is a bit of a table just showing the generic AP solutions out there in market, and then what is very unique about TRAILD. You'll see a lot of this functionality as I take you through the live demonstration. But when I talk about complexity, I talk about things like multiple attachments on a supplier email. So if you've got 5 or 6 invoices, it can be fed through directly by email into TRAILD. If you're dealing with multiple invoices in a single PDF file, today you're having to split them out manually one by one and process them into SYSPRO. TRAILD has an automatic splitting engine. We have systematic matching to purchase orders, GRNs, making sure that everything you raise on the PO has been accounted for and the GRN that's been processed matches the invoice. And that's all a header and line level matching. You've got machine learning enablement. So it's learning and understanding your business within the context of your operations and how you work with your suppliers. And then we obviously have all of that built-in approval workflow for the anomalies. So any issues or risks or problems that the business could be looking to face, it runs it through that approval process, which is both iPad, mobile, and desktop platform enabled. And then that always-on security, right? Making sure that what's going through is correct. Banking level security, supply verification against both government databases and payment checks. And then a full executive review and dashboard to see what's going on before you actually execute and you make your payment. So you can see all the way from the supplier payment that you're about to make, all the way down to the original invoices that have been reconciled against that payment run that you want to process. So what I want to do now is I want to go straight into the product. And this is probably the real crux of the presentation today. So I'm going to quickly flip across into the product, and hopefully you can see my screen. Can you guys still see that okay? Trace?
Yep, sorry, I'm nodding. Yes.
That's okay. Excellent. So guys, this is the TRAILD in tray. So this is the top of the funnel for everything to do with accounts payable when connected in with SYSPRO. And essentially, as I mentioned earlier, this can be directly connected through Outlook or Gmail, and it can have your AP invoices fed through directly from your AP mailbox directly into the TRAILD in tray for processing. And as I mentioned, we deal with all those different levels of complexity. Single invoice on a supplier email, no problem. Multiple invoices on a supplier email, no problem. Multiple invoices inside a single PDF that's come from a scanner, no problem. We're going to be able to deal with all of that complexity and have those invoices feeding into the system. You also have the ability to upload invoices on demand, or you can even simply drag and drop them into the screen and process them in bulk. Essentially, not that many of our customers do this because it's not the most efficient way to get them in. You can do it this way, but email is the most efficient way to seamlessly bring those invoices into the platform. I'm going to go through a bunch of different examples today, both PO and non-PO related invoices, so ones that relate to GRNs and ones that don't, just to give you an idea and a flavor for how the system can work for all of your AP documents being processed in the system. As the invoices are coming through via email, it's going to run the invoices through our automation engine. There's 3 unique layers of automation that I want to talk about, but it's going to extract all the data and information from those documents. So within a couple of seconds, you're going to start to see those invoices land, and they're going to land in a draft state. So you have a digital place for all of your invoices to land, regardless of whether the GRNs have been processed or not, or whether they're even GRN related or not. So within this tray, you're going to start to see the invoices begin to land. And you're going to see all the data that's been extracted from those documents. So the invoice number, who the supplier is that sent through the invoice, which company it relates to, the invoice date, the due date, the amount, and it's automatically assigned it to someone in the organization based on our built-in workflow engine. And what you're going to see as well is it's going to order the invoices seamlessly based on which ones are PO related, which ones are related to GRNs in the system, which ones are PO related but haven't yet been receipted, and which ones are non-PO related. So it allows you to prioritize your time by the system telling you, yes, these two invoices that have come through from Acuity and Ozone Organics are three-way match to the purchase order in SYSPRO, and the GRNs have been accounted for. For this one, for Bunnings, great, the invoices come in and it matches a PO, but the items are yet to be receipted. So I'm actually going to put this one on hold for the time being, and the system will notify me with a little receipt icon and an email notification to say there is now a three-way match enabled for Bunnings. That one's ready to be processed through. And then we've obviously got our non-PO related invoices as well that we can send through the system. Things like utilities, gas, water, rent, those sorts of things. So what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to drill down into the first supplier invoice in order to give you a picture of what this looks like from an automation perspective. So on the left-hand side here, you can see a digital copy of the supplier invoice that's come through. From a document management perspective, both the finance team and the approvers have the ability to append secondary documents. So whether it be an Excel file, a Word document, an email string, it can all be centralized together in TRAILD as well as in SYSPRO. On the right-hand side, you've got three key components. You've got the header level data extraction. You've got the goods section with the matching to the purchase order and GRNs. You've got the activities log and tracking history. And you've got your pre-populated coding, so your allocations to your GL codes, your analysis codes, and who the invoice has been assigned to. I want to talk to each one of these components one by one because they're really important as to the way the system works. So if I just have a look here in the first component, it's pulled out all the header level information from the document. It's pulled out things like the invoice number, the invoice detail, the supplier detail, and the pricing detail from the invoice. If I click on the invoice number, you should be able to see a big red box around the invoice total on the document. So you can see the big $2,200. What the system has done is it's run it through three layers of automation. The first layer is the extraction of the data, which is the OCR. Now that's sort of a commodity. There's many systems that offer basic OCR data extraction. The value really isn't in that. That's just extracting the data. It doesn't make any sense of it, right? It doesn't understand your business or learn what's normal. With TRAILD, once we extract the data, we have a classification engine that sits on top of that to understand what that data means. Is it a numeric field? Is it a date? Is it a string? Is it a character? And it's extracting everything from left to right and classifying it and tabularizing that data. What that allows you to do then is select any component on the document you like, and you should be able to see that big red box now moving around the document. And as a finance team or as an AP clerk, I can turn around and say, you know what, for this supplier, I actually never pay them on the total amount on the invoice. I always pay them on the balance due. That's just how we work with this vendor. So I can train the system by selecting that. It's now going to highlight the amount due for Ozone Organics, and it's going to populate that every single time moving forward as the invoice total. That machine learning is enabled on every single field. So whether it be the invoice number that's been pulled out of the document, whether it be the purchase order number that's matched to the GRN, whether it be the invoice date, whether it be the due date, the system is pulling that information out of the document, classifying it, and machine learning on sitting on top of it to understand what's normal for your business. As it's automating that data, it's also running it through our risk assessment to make sure what's actually come through from the supplier is legitimate. For example, if the supplier invoice came through with terms on it saying 7 days from invoice date to due date, and your payment terms in SYSPRO were 30 days, it's going to flag an urgent payment warning, for example. Or if the invoice came through, and just like my co-founder's example, the invoice was compromised in some way, so the payment details were adjusted, the system's going to identify where that invoice has come from, and it's going to fingerprint it and say, wait a minute, the payment details detected on the document here have actually changed, and those payment details are different to what we've got stored in SYSPRO historically, and they're also different to what we've paid this supplier over the previous 12 months. So this is an anomaly in terms of the bank details flagging around, this is different to how we normally work with this supplier. Outside of just bank details checks, there's hundreds of data points that go into the validation of this invoice. It analyzes things like excess supplier charges. It looks at government databases for government validation, tax validation, business registration details. It looks at things like duplicate invoices. It's got this always on anomaly detection, just like you have on your credit card, to protect the business from potential mistakes, errors, or even potential fraud that can happen in the process. Awesome. So now, as you can see, the system has automated all that information. It's run it through our risk checks. Everything looks okay. In this case, it's pulled out a purchase order number telling me this invoice definitely relates to GRNs in the system. And it's telling me that in real time, and it's linking through those associated GRNs from SYSPRO. So you can see here, it's reading the invoice and it's pulling through each of the GRN lines. It's showing the PO that was raised, PO 638. This is what was ordered. This was what the unit cost is. This is what the GRNs are in terms of the receipting, and it's pulled through all the associated coding, so the GL codes, the analysis codes, so on and so forth. You can also see here it's going to flag any variance between the invoice, the purchase order, and the GRN. So let's just say this invoice came through for, $3,200, but the GRN was processed for $2,200, or the PO was raised for $2,200. It's going to flag a $1,000 variance instantly as this invoice comes through and it does the matching. That can be automatically routed back to the PO owner who raised the purchase order in SYSPRO. So we can have the system default it back to the PO owner based on our workflow engine. We also have built-in interactive comments like LinkedIn messaging, where I could turn around here and I see there's a $1,000 PPV. I can tag Karen as a user from finance and say, Karen, massive PPV. Can you check this out as soon as possible? And that's going to send an instant email notification to Karen. I can put this on hold due to the variance, and we can go back and forth communicating in an audible, centralized way until we get this resolved. Maybe it's a quantity issue in terms of the receipting. Maybe it was an incorrect adjustment on the purchase order. Maybe the invoice is wrong, but we can go back and forth in a seamless way to get this resolved. In saying that, this invoice has come through and everything's matched accordingly to the purchase order and the GRNs. One thing I want to show you, and it comes up a lot with our SYSPRO customers, is partial fulfillment. So where you raise a purchase order for 10 items, 3 of them come in on one invoice, 7 of them come in another invoice. TRAILD can deal with all of that complexity. So in the sense of, as soon as the invoice comes in, it's going to pull through the PO number and it's going to match it to the GRN lines that it can based on the receipting. But what it's also got is it's got a real-time lookup into SYSPRO for all of those GRNs, and it shows you the invoice on the left-hand side, the the purchase order number, and the purchase order information for that supplier, and it links to all the purchase order lines. So you can see here it's matched to each of the purchase order lines that were raised on PO 638. Each of the items are obviously the marketing services, printing and advertising, the quantity, the unit cost, and total. And you can actually see the items have been receipted and the GRN has been accounted for. So the system allows you to deal with, just say you got the first invoice through for PO 638 and it was only for marketing services, right? You're not going to have all 3 lines. You're going to link through to the first purchase order line because that's the one that's related to go-to-market services. And you're going to push that AP bill into SYSPRO, but it's not going to close out the purchase order because you've got 2 line items on the purchase order still remaining for printing and advertising. So the next invoice that comes through from Ozone Organics for PO 638, identical invoice, except it comes through for printing and advertising. It's going to link through the last remaining purchase order lines, and it's going to close out and fulfill that purchase order in SYSPRO. So you can have 2 AP invoices in SYSPRO that have been synced through from TRAILD, and a closed out purchase order that's been fulfilled, and the GRN's mapped as well. So essentially, we can deal with all of that complexity. I didn't talk about one thing then around also dealing with multiple POs on a single supplier invoice. We can also deal with that as well. So, but in this case, the invoice has come through, it's extracted all the data and information, it's matched to the purchase order and GRNs, there's no variance, and I can see I've set up my variance controls. I can go ahead and submit this invoice. Now, in this particular example, what you're going to see is essentially this is going to run through our automation process, and it's going to say, okay, this is a low-risk invoice from a security point of view. It's matched to the purchase order and the GRN. Because it's matched, it doesn't need to go through a secondary approval workflow. It's auto-approved it, and it's synced it directly into AP invoice posting in SYSPRO. And I'll show you that in a second. To give you an idea of the pace of this, as the invoices continue to come in a draft state, you'll see a digital copy of the invoice on the left-hand side. On the right-hand side, again, you can see all the extracted data, the invoice total, the purchase order number. Again, it's linked it through to the associated GRNs for these laptops that we ordered. I can see the part numbers for the inventory items that have landed in the warehouse. I can see the PO that was raised, the items that have been receipted. I can see there's no variance between the AP invoice, the purchase order, and the GRN. I can see the quantity that's landed, and I can go ahead again and submit that invoice. Again, that's sort of the speed that it's running through in terms of the validation, matching, and automation. Again, it's a low-risk invoice. It's matched the purchase order and the GRN in SYSPRO, and it's auto-approved and synced in the system for payment. For any non-PO related invoices, I'm just going to go through and show you a couple of examples of that too, because it's really important for things like utilities, gas, water, rent, stuff you may not have a PO for, right? That's not inventory related. Here you can see again the invoices come through and it's extracted the data in exactly the same way. It's pulled out the invoice total, it's pulled out the invoice number, it's pulled out everything you would expect. Because it doesn't have a PO number on the document, it scanned every single component of this document, as you can see, to try and find a purchase order to match to the PO and GRN in SYSPRO. In this case, there is no PO number on the document. So what the system's done is it said, okay, we can either just read the header information, or we can read the line level detail as well. In this case, what you can see is, maybe I need to process this bill at a header level. Maybe I don't. Maybe I need to split this invoice and say, actually, I need this invoice to go to 2 different GL codes. And I can split it 50-50 and have one GL code going to, freight expenses and one GL going to other expenses. It's as simple as that. But I may want to turn around here and actually go, you know what? I need to read the line item detail on this non-PO related invoice because I need to allocate them to different analysis codes or different GL codes or whatever it might be. And so essentially what I can do here is I can turn around and I can click add from invoice, and the system is automatically going to read the line level details. Again, you should be able to see the line level boxes on the invoice itself as I click around. And why that's important, let's just say for this Piping Premier Mini, I need to split this to a different GL code or a different job posting. I can turn around here and I can allocate this to, say, freight expenses with a click of a button, and now it's split out those GL codes accordingly. So I've got the ability here to automate the header level data, but also the line level data if I'm dealing with non-PO related invoices and different coding allocations. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go and submit that invoice, and that non-PO related invoice is going to run through our approval process. And the reason being is there's nothing to match it against. There's no validation point. So it needs to be reviewed and approved by somebody. In terms of, I just want to show one other example, and this happens a little bit where, essentially the invoice is coming through via the AP mailbox, but imagine someone also sends that invoice through via email directly into the system. TRAILD is going to flag those anomalies. So you can see here this Bunnings invoice has come through again, and it's actually flagged it as a duplicate invoice because this invoice already exists in SYSPRO or has already come into the TRAILD system. I can click here and open it up. But if I tried to submit this invoice, as it would from a security standpoint, it's saying this is a duplicate, this is an anomaly, please pay attention to it. If you were to try and submit this duplicate, you literally have to type in submit duplicate in order to push it through. But in this case, I can see the system is protecting the business from paying it twice. I'm going to trash this out and it's going to drop me to the next invoice in my queue. So again, that always on monitoring and security checks. For your more complex invoices, and we see this a lot where people walk over to a scanner, they scan 20 or 30 hard copy documents directly into TRAILD. Essentially, they're going to push that PDF file directly into the system via email. So this is an example of that. Someone in the business has walked over to the scanner. They've scanned 3 or 4 separate documents for, car rentals that we took from Avis. We can see here within the PDF file that's come through, there's 3 separate Avis invoices with 3 separate invoice numbers. What's going to happen is it's going to automatically run it through our splitting and recommendation engine. It's going to identify where the multiple invoices are in this PDF, and it's going to say, okay, here's invoice 1, here's invoice 2, here's invoice 3. Based on the different invoice numbers and different page numbers, it's recommended where the splits are, and it's automatically split it out for you. So instead of having to save each invoice one by one by one by one, or even have to process them in the system manually, they can be walked over to a scanner if they're hard copy documents, scanned and sent directly into the TRAILD platform for processing. And what you'll see now as we go back into the TRAILD in tray, instead of having one file with multiple invoices in it, you're going to have 3 separate documents that are now processing for Avis for those 3 separate car rentals. And they're going to come through with different amounts, different due dates, everything like that, because they're essentially separate AP documents. And you can see they've all landed now. So that's basically covering a bunch of the automation process around, the invoices coming in via email, the automatic matching to the purchase orders, the GRNs, the verification checks, and everything like that. Behind this is an approval workflow engine. So essentially where your anomalies will get allocated out, your exceptions. And this approval engine is completely platform agnostic. We have so many customers in the warehouse or out on site or senior management doing approvals on their mobile phone, and I'll show you that in a second. But as an approver, you're going to get notified via email and in the product to say, hey, Adam, you've got 2 new invoices in your queue. These are the suppliers. These are when they're due, and this is how much it's for. And I can prioritize my time based on the risk assessment. So as an approver, I can drill down here, and I can simply see on the left-hand side exactly the supplier invoice that's come through. If I'm out on site and I need to upload something, maybe I'm in the warehouse, I need to upload a packing slip, I can do that on my mobile, I can do that on the desktop, and I can have everything centralized together in SYSPRO. From a risk perspective, it's showing me that this is a low risk invoice. It's well within my normal supplier trend and payment history. I've got a full audit log to see where this invoice came in and when it was assigned to me. And I can simply go ahead and say, yep, I'm comfortable with this. I'm going to approve this invoice and get it exported for payment. Then what it's going to do is it's going to drop me to the next invoice in my queue. And this is an example of a high risk problematic invoice. This is an invoice that's come through and it's telling me it's high risk, and it's telling me I need to pay attention to this because the invoice has come through for nearly $3,000. When our normal supplier average over the previous 12 months based on our normal standard deviation and that normal bell curve has never been greater than $2,100. So it's telling me based on our normal transaction history and our median over a 12-month period that this is an excess supplier charge in and above the average of about $1,345. So between the excess supplier charge and the payment details alert, it's flagged this as an anomaly or a problematic invoice. I can see here my colleague in the warehouse has initially taken a look at it and they've routed it to me for secondary review. I'm actually uncomfortable with this. I might want to turn around and send it to my manager. So essentially route this through to Karen for her to take a third look at it. Or I'm going to turn around and say, you know what, given the risk on this, I'm going to reject it. I'm going to put it in a holding pattern due to incorrect pricing. Maybe the incorrect quantity was delivered or receipted. Maybe it's a fraudulent or compromised invoice. Or maybe I just want to say, please investigate. So essentially here, these rejection reasons are completely customizable for your business, but it enables you to see the right things at the right time as an approver to make the decision. So essentially what the platform is doing from a security point of view here is embedding that same level of credit card or banking security to your AP process that you expect every day on those $10, $15, $100 transactions on your credit card, but for the millions of dollars running through your AP, having that same level of security and always on protection. So what I'm going to do now is going to reject that invoice and it's going to drop me to the next invoice in my queue. In this particular example, there's nothing else left. I've actioned all the anomalies. I can go back to my daily activities. Now, in terms of the automated workflow, we can make this as automatic and routing as in terms of the routing processes you'd like. We can set up automatic rules in the system to be able to have invoices routed to particular departments based on different GL codes, based on projects, based on a bunch of different rules. In this case, I've set up an auto approval rule to say, you know, where the invoice comes in, it's a low risk invoice and it matches the purchase order and GRN in SYSPRO and the line details match and the quantity and unit cost. Great, we can have it auto approved and sent directly through. In this particular case, I've created a multi-level approval hierarchy where I've said, okay, all invoices greater than $100,000 must go to Karen when it relates to this particular company in SYSPRO. And essentially here, I've set up 3 separate conditions. I've said where the invoice total is greater than $100,000 and the GL code equals X and the supplier equals Y, it's got to go through to Karen for initial review and approval. Now, maybe Karen's in the warehouse and I need Karen or Brad to review it. Whoever gets to it first can approve it, and then it's going to run through to our secondary level of approval to Mark as our managing director for final sign-off. So we can have as many levels of approval as you need and as many routing rules as you like based on getting the right information to the right person at the right time. As I mentioned earlier, a lot of our customers will route based on if there's a variance to the PO and the GRN, route it back to the PO owner who raised the PO in SYSPRO. These are all the sorts of different conditions that you can use. Route on GL code, route on job, route on supplier, there's a department, there's a myriad of different jobs, routing rules based on what's on the invoice and what's in SYSPRO that you can go by. So if I wanted to go by where GL code equals, GL code other expenses, I have the ability to be able to do that as simply and easily as this. So very intuitive in terms of setting up the automated routing. And then there's the question of, well, you don't want your business to just stop when people go on leave. You don't want your suppliers to not be paid. You don't want to miss out on pay early discounts. How do you manage that process? So we have delegations of authority. So if people do go on leave or they're out of the office, essentially here as an approver, I can say, it relates to this company. I'm the current approver, so I'm going on leave. I need Tracy to take over all of the invoices that are coming through my tray in the automated routing, including anything that's currently outstanding up until the end of this month, making sure that the business doesn't just stop because I'm unavailable, that the business still continues to run, we continue to pay our suppliers in a timely manner, and we're still managing our cash flow and taking advantage of those pay early discounts. So again, that intuitive ability to be able to manage the business with software and intuition around how to work out your approval workflows and your mappings when people aren't around. Once the invoices have run through that automation, matching, and approval process, essentially as a finance team, you have complete visibility over everything in the organization. So you can see which invoices are where based on which company in SYSPRO they relate to. You can see where they're at in their life cycle, which invoices are out there pending review. Nothing. Everything's been actioned accordingly. Great. Which invoices have been sent back? Which ones are in our holding investigation queue? Okay, Adam sent this back due to it being high risk. It's been rejected. I want to drill down and find out why Adam sent this back. Okay, so as finance, I can see he sent it back as a rejection reason, please investigate. I can see the rejection reasons here and the high risk score. I can see it was sent in by Mark, submitted by Adam. This was the GL code at that point in time. And I can see all the notes, comments, and audit history. So I can go back to Adam back and forth and resolve this with the supplier and have visibility on what's going on. Most of the time, I'll be dealing with my approved invoices. So these are the invoices that have come in, they've been matched and validated accordingly. You can see here, you can select each of the individual invoices you need, or you can select them in bulk, or we actually have an auto export directly into SYSPRO based on the status of the invoice being approved or auto approved. Now what I'm going to show you is how those invoices sync directly into SYSPRO. So if I just jump across here into SYSPRO, this should look familiar to a lot of you, okay? So there's a seamless sync between SYSPRO and TRAILD in things like suppliers and GL codes and currencies. It's always on monitoring and syncing between the two systems. If I just go into my supplier query, I'm going to show you three things here. The AP invoice posting is where TRAILD has posted the bill to. We've got the payment cycle maintenance for the payment review and reconciliation. But let's just go into our supplier query here quickly, and I'm going to show you an example of an AP bill we've just sent through. So if I go into my supplier, say supplier 28, we can go in here and we can have a look at the invoices that have come through from TRAILD. So importantly here, you'll see two invoices have come through from TRAILD. Invoice 1677, which we were just showing you, and 16991. You can see the invoice dates, the due dates, the amounts, the journal entries, the invoice reference details, the balance, everything has come through. Everything that you would normally key in manually has been populated using TRAILD's automation engine, to the point that it's not only just embedded the information, it's embedded the actual documents directly into SYSPRO. So if I press play here, you're going to see the actual PDF or AP document stored directly in SYSPRO, along with any supporting documentation that's been through that approval process. So anything that's been uploaded by the finance team or by the approvers, packing slips, bill of lading, those sorts of things. So essentially here, all that information is stored in SYSPRO. If I go to my GL distribution, you're also going to see it's not only just sent through the key information, but it's allocated to the correct general ledger codes. It's populated the description, the expense type, the amount, even the notation. So everything that you would normally spend your time on in terms of entering data, matching and validating against the GRN, all of that has been done in a seamless way, matching and validating between TRAILD and SYSPRO. So at this point, once your invoices are all in the system from TRAILD, essentially what's going to happen is, as you would today, you've basically replaced AP invoice posting with your TRAILD automation engine as the invoices land, and you're going to go and you're going to create your payment cycle maintenance. So you're going to go and select which invoices you want to pay, and you're going to start to batch up those invoices into different payment types, whether it be, electronic payments, whether it be, manual payments or card payments. There's a bunch of different payment methods you may select from. When you create that payment and cycle maintenance, I just want to jump back into TRAILD quickly. What's going to happen is it's going to feed through that payment file into our payment review section for executive review. So under this payments tab, it's going to show you the payment reference number or batch file that's been created from SYSPRO, so that payment cycle maintenance. it's going to tell you if it's an EFT payment or if it's a card payment or if it's a check payment. And you're going to be able to drill down here within the payment file. And this is a digital overview of what you're about to pay. So it shows you the payment cycle maintenance that's been generated from SYSPRO. It tells you the payment type and the full payment value that you're about to make payment on, so $8,500. And it tells me it's been completed in SYSPRO, but it's yet pending approval in TRAILD. So it still needs to be signed off. This is for our CFO or our owner to review and make sure that this is working accordingly. I can see within this payment file, I've got all these different suppliers that I'm about to pay within this $8,500. It shows me their payment reference number from SYSPRO, and it also shows me whether they've been verified or not by TRAILD during the supplier onboarding process. So as I mentioned, we plumb into both government and third-party databases to verify and check that supplier, both business, banking, registration details, all that sort of stuff. And I'll talk more to that in a moment when we get into the suppliers tab. But importantly, you can see here all the payment amounts you're about to make to each of these suppliers within the payment run. You can see the full 12-month payment history. So you've got a full trend on any peaks like this one with Ozone Organics. So you can see any anomalies or high curves in terms of the trend. And it also orders the payments based on risk score. So it's saying, these payments are all completely fine. They look good. But for these 3 payments, there are some anomalies here that we need to pay attention to. So in this particular case, it's saying that the invoice value that's come through for this particular period in time actually is less than what's in our payment file. So something's gone on here. So I want to have a look at what does that relate to in relation to the $70. So from here, I can drill down from the supplier batch payment to the individual supplier transaction to the individual invoices that have been used to reconcile up that supplier payment. And it shows me the 5 invoices that make up that $70 payment to Keith Simmons Engineering. And what's important here is it shows me the risk score of those invoices and the approval path that they've been through. So I can see where that invoice came in, who reviewed it, who approved it. It gives me all that level of information, including the approval date. Now, what's interesting here is it's telling me that $65 worth of invoice value across the 5 invoices has come through TRAILD and been automated and assessed. But what's interesting is that $70 has landed in SYSPRO and $70 has been batched up in your payment file. So what it's telling me here is there's a $5 variance between what's been automated and checked in TRAILD and what's landed in SYSPRO. Now, this could be $5, it could be $50,000, or it could be $5,000. Doesn't matter. The system is basically saying someone is keyed a bill directly into SYSPRO for $5.25. That's actually bypassed the TRAILD automation and security checks. These are the sorts of things that we're checking for, any anomalies, right? I can even, as a CFO, drill down from the batch file and the supplier payment of $70 down to one of the invoices that has been reconciled and make up that payment. So instead of having things piled on top of each other with paper, I can click on this and it's going to open that digital copy of the invoice that makes up part of that payment to the supplier. There's the supplier invoice, there's the risk score, there's the purchase order and GRN that it matched to, all of the coding allocations, the activity log, and the tracking history, who it was uploaded by, submitted by, everything like that. So as, I guess, an executive or the person responsible for making this $8,500 payment or $8 million payment, I can see exactly what I need to look at in terms of the total payment trend and the associated risks, and I can be comfortable to approve this payment batch before I actually release it and process it into the bank. So hopefully this gives you a bit of a taste of the additional insights and verification and overview that you get even at the point of payment for what you're actually processing throughout your business. But the idea with TRAILD is to protect you from invoice in all the way through to payment out and make sure any problems or anomalies are flagged as early in the process as possible. In terms of supplier onboarding and supplier master data management, obviously we have a real-time lookup and sync between the supplier information in SYSPRO and feeding that into TRAILD. What we will do when the supplier information is in SYSPRO is we'll run it through our global verification network and we'll see whether that supplier is verified and got the tick of approval by TRAILD. As I mentioned, we're going to be running through government database checks, business registration information, banking details, those sorts of things. The reason this is so important, if you're missing, a business registration number in your supplier master data, for good reason, it's going to fail our government checks. That doesn't mean you can't call and verify the supplier. You call them, you make sure their information is correct and you stamp your name against it, but then you're accountable for that check and balance, right? Essentially where this really becomes powerful is essentially if someone like my co-founder had their email impersonated and the CFO sent an impersonated email to the finance team and saying, I need this invoice paid ASAP. please process it immediately. Obviously, it's come from the CFO. The AP team are going to feel like they're doing what they're told, even though it was not him or her and it was impersonated. Essentially here, what you're going to see if I just look up one of these suppliers, if I were to go in and update the payment details for Air Liquide on the basis of that email, it's going to rerun that verification check in real time. It's going to say, hey, wait a minute, the payment details that have been updated in the system in SYSPRO are actually new and unverified payment details. They've never been used on the platform before, and they're unusual in terms of this supplier, in terms of the way they're normally transacted with. And it would send a relevant notification to each of the relevant parties in the business to notify them of that, so that when they get into the point of payment, they've already dealt with any anomalies or problems in terms of this sort of thing. So it's that always on supplier management, supplier verification, and anomaly detection. The other thing as well is around indexation of data. You need to find something quickly. How do you find it? Everything's free to text search. I can search for the supplier Bunnings here. Instantly, it pulls up the supplier with all of the invoices that have run through the system. I can even search part of a PO number or even part of an invoice number, 5227, right? It's going to pull through the last couple of digits. I can drill down from that supplier index. I can see the invoice and supporting documentation. It shows me the risk score at that point in time, that it was a new supplier that we'd never dealt with them before, which is fair enough. And it shows me all the tracking history and logs. So essentially everything is available at the tip of your fingers in terms of visibility on what's going on from invoice in to payment out. Awesome. What I'm going to do, that's pretty much a full overview of the product in itself. We obviously have some additional functionality around reporting, document management, user setup, and we can cover that in more depth on a one-on-one basis if you're interested in that. But what I want to do quickly is I just want to toggle back to my presentation. And I want to talk about, well, we've shown you all of this technology, but what does it really mean for your business? So essentially here, these are some of the statistics around the sort of savings that you would anticipate having from a system like TRAILD. So today, Forrester Consulting ran a study of the average cost to process an invoice from start to finish in a business in terms of the overhead costs, the salaries, processing time, chasing down approvals, matching to purchase orders and GRNs, making sure things are accounted for. And they estimated that at approximately 20 euros per document, or £20 per document. And essentially what we're saying here, with an automated and verification system like TRAILD, that we would reduce that cost down to $5 per document. So you'd be saving nearly 15 pounds per document on average. So if you applied that logic to 300 documents per month, it would be approximately $50,000, 50,000 pounds per month that you would be saving in terms of 300 invoices being processed. And that's just taking into account, the ROI saving on the automation. So if you think about it, if you could elevate your team and get them to do better, more value-adding tasks outside of manual data entry, manual validation, manual matching, manual processing, manual chasing down for approvals, all that sort of stuff, what would your business do with that extra time and resource? And then there's the question of, well, what happens when something goes wrong? So with the ever-evolving threats that are out there, these are the sorts of things that we're seeing in terms of the sort of fraud cases, both mistakes, errors, of course, but sort of, fraud across the UK and European markets. And we're seeing a large percentage increase in terms of over the last 24 months. We're seeing, 2 in 3 UK companies impacted through business email compromise or invoice fraud. It's becoming very sophisticated with technologies like ChatGPT and impersonation and social engineering. These fakes are becoming very, very well sophisticated, and even tricking, systems as well as tricking people. So, and the average amount stolen, just like my co-founder's business, over $100,000. For a business that's in manufacturing, doing a high volume with low margins, that can really set a company back. And for them, it nearly sent a 20-year agriculture business broke, right? So it's about, hey, how do we manage this AP efficiency part, but also how do we make sure the business is secure and having visibility and over their payments and what's going through the company. So what I'm going to do now, I'll probably hand over to you, Tracy, maybe just because you've done a lot of SYSPRO implementations with our customers, maybe just to talk about what our customers sort of say and sort of their feedback around the product. And I'll hand to you to sort of talk about these 3 customers and their feedback around TRAILD, and feel free to jump in.
Excellent. Thanks, Adam. I think it's probably time for you to have a glass of water or something after all that sort of talking through. I think, guys, one of the things that you've all been through a SYSPRO implementation, and the thing I love about TRAILD is how simple the implementation is. It really is a plug and play. It uses the business objects, so our customer success team, of which we've got a global team, will work with your internal team in order to get your system up and running. We'll then go through and do all the training that you need for the system. We've got plenty of customers who sign the proposal for TRAILD and go live within a week, and really a lot of it just depends on the level of testing and the change management that you want to work with your team. We've got lots of customers who are very happy, and of course we're always happy to give you some as reference sites. I was chatting to one customer today and getting a little bit of their feedback, and some of their feedback was about how much they enjoyed the scalability of the product, that this particular customer is part of a group and has some customers that have 200 invoices a month, and then some in the group that have 5,000 invoices a month. And they were saying how easy it is to run the TRAILD program throughout all of the different divisions. They were also quite impressed about the document management, about how even with a group and also with other companies, how simple and easy it is to find those invoices. And I spend quite a bit of time working with our South African companies, and many of them have just come out of audit season. And with the reporting tools that we have in TRAILD, it's really simple to be able to send that report to your auditor, and that gives them a URL access straight through to the invoice, which means you're not going rummaging through filing cabinets to get those invoices out of the system.
Thanks, Kelly, and everyone at Nexus. We really appreciate it, and thanks everyone for taking the time.